I am welcoming everyone to this webinar. It's the first one of this year, 2022. We had four online webinars in the previous year. I will not take too much time talking about the series or anything else because we have very interesting speakers here, and I'm sure we will have an amazing discussion. I will just briefly say, I will do two things. I will first briefly introduce our speakers, and second, I will say a word on today's session and why it is important. First, let me just introduce the speakers. We have three presentations and four speakers today. We have David Sacchetto who's an associate professor in sociology of labor at the University of Padua. David's work is focused on migrant labor in Italy mostly. He has done a lot of work, which I know personally, on posting of workers and different dimensions of this problematic in Italy. And his work is particularly attentive to dimensions of race and gender, especially his recent work, which is also kind of in the focus of the paper that he and Valeria will be presenting today. Valeria Piro is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Milan, working on migration and different forms of collective organization of labor. Her last work that I know of is focusing on organizing in the gig, in different sectors of the gig economy in different countries. She recently was a visiting researcher at the University of Amsterdam, looking into different forms of organization among gig workers in Amsterdam. Then we have Sergio Zulian, or Zulian, I hope I pronounced the name correctly. Sergio is activist in the grass union, ADL Chobas, who it's a grassroots union active in northern Italy. He has been involved in different organizing campaigns and different kinds of struggle across several economic sectors, transport and logistics. Also, some of these transport and logistic companies who have been involved in the meat industry in the region. So that he will tell today more about his experience in organizing workers in parts of the Italian meat industry. And finally, we have Monica Gomez, who is the head of the International and European Work Council in the Comisiones Obreras, or the trade union confederation from Catalonia, Spain. So Monica will be also talking particularly on recent experiences, with organizing and collective action in the Spanish meat industry. So before we go into the discussion, I will briefly say something about this session. And so the session for me is a bit of a continuation after the discussions that we had in the last session, where we were discussing different countries but similar problems. The last session on labor in the meat industry was focusing on mostly Western Europe and North America. We had discussions on the Netherlands, Germany, and Canada. And basically the discussion was going into how migrant labor, how the whole meat industry in these countries was relying on migrant labor, and why migrant workers in the meat industry were particularly exploitable. And we were looking into the structures that are creating this exploitability of these workers. We were looking into how particular legal regimes like posting or subcontracting were actually creating the precariousness of these workers and were making them prone to exploitable work relations. So now we are looking into Southern Europe, and which is to me interesting, and why we are moving the focus to Southern Europe was for mainly two reasons. First, some of the structures and the heavy reliance and even dependence on migrant work is exactly present in Southern Europe, in both countries, Italy and Spain. Migrant workers are present in meat production at all levels. It is interesting that actually in Southern Europe, in Italy and Spain, the structure of the migrant workers' body is different than in Northern Europe. For example, in Germany or in the Netherlands, most workers were coming from Eastern Europe and were European citizens. In Italy, we have different contexts of migration happening, which Valeria and David will be going on. But also, so this was interesting in comparing this with the previous discussion in terms of structure of the worker body that we're looking into here. But second, it was interesting that some very interesting and relevant struggles are ongoing in these two countries recently. And in the media, the strikes in the meat industry were quite exposed that were happening in the second half of last year. And Monica will be talking more about this because partly these collective actions were organized by the Comisiones Obreras, which is the organization that she works with. But also, Sergio will be talking about all kind of struggles that were happening and how workers have been self-organizing and organizing through interventions by grassroots trade unions independently from, let's say, institutionalized trade unions in Italy, and about how these conflicts have played out. So that's why I think both in terms of how legal structures are shaping the whole industry, like through the models that Davy and Valeria will be describing, but also the resistance in terms of worker organizing and collective action that has been happening in these two countries, make them two very interesting recent studies works focusing our attention on. So without further ado, we will move to the discussions, and I will give the floor to Davy and Valeria, who will present a recent paper of them, very relevant, which is basically providing the background story for what we will be then discussing in terms of collective actions with Sergio and Monica. Valeria and David, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Vladimir. I'm the one who is going to present. Can you hear me well?
Yes, perfectly.
Yes.
Okay, perfectly. So I share the screen, so I can share a presentation that we prepared with Debbie. Okay, so yeah, thank you very much for inviting us to take part of this seminar series. And yeah, actually our research, I hope that we can contribute to this discussion in a, let's say, twofold direction, as Vladimir was anticipating. So yeah, first of all, we try to provide an overview of how the meat industry works in Italy, especially focusing on the composition of the labor force and on the process of outsourcing to what we call cooperative of convenience. I will say more about this. But we also try to make a more theoretical point, a more theoretical argument, because our aim with the paper that Vladimir introduced was trying to somehow develop the debate on subcontracting by giving more attention to the topic of race and racialization processes. And of course, so our discussion is much in line with what you have been doing during the previous seminar, giving the attention to high presence of migrant within the meat sector. So generally, the debate on subcontracting, scholars studying subcontracting essayed a lot concerning which are the causes and the effect of subcontracting. And of course, as much has been said on worsening of labor conditions, so worsening of salaries, intensifying of work risks, worsening health and safety in the workplace due to subcontracting, and also impairing worker solidarity, so making more difficult union activities. But according to us, the role of race, specific role of race and the racialization process in the way in which they shape, so they had it. So that's why in our research we focus specifically on this aspect, trying to understand which is the role of race and racialization processes in shaping somehow the labor process. And so we look at these meat processing plants through this theoretical gate, so trying to identify which are the racialization practices that takes place every day in these plants, but also how workers are able to mobilize, racial solidarities, racial ties in order to engage in mobilization and struggles. Concerning our methodology, what we did a research, an empirical research. The majority of it was before the pandemic, so between October 2018 and March 2020. And we focused mainly in processing plants in the north of Italy, because this is the area where the majority of companies breeding and slaughtering animals is concentrated in Italy. And we focused on two case studies. One was a big group processing poultry, and the other one is a group processing meat, beef meat. And we gave them the pseudonymous name of chicken group and beef group. And our work was mainly collecting semi-structured interviews, 16 of which with trade unionists and 74 with workers, both Italian and migrants. And we're also conducting two focus groups, one before and one after the pandemic. But we were also spending, we gathered many hours of ethnographic observation thanks to the possibility of attending weekly the premises of a grassroots union, and so taking part in their activities of legal help desk, also taking part in strikes and pickets during the course of our research. And thanks to two managers that we interviewed, we were also able to visit some slaughterhouses in Italy. And so the picture that we are going to screen throughout the presentation are those that we take during our visit. So first of all, as you all know very well, the type of labor we are speaking about is considered a dirty work, and is a tough labor, both from a physical and an emotional point of view, because of course it's an assembly chain work, so the work is repetitive, is workers work in contact with meat, with the can you hear me?
Yes, we have some problems. Your voice sometimes is not clear.
Yes, the connection is sometimes unstable, but these are short moments for now.
Okay. So I hope you got the majority of I'm trying to say. So yeah, trying to describe the kind of work in these plants is mainly a tough job, because of course the work is done alternatively in very warm and very cold environment. Contact with meat, contact with blood, like smells are very strong. So of course it's a kind of job for which it was not easy to recruit workers. So since mid-80s, without increasing salaries, companies in the north of Italy has quite a lot of trouble to recruit labor force. So that's why they started to recruit, especially for the worst activities, so that the dirtiest job, they start to recruit workers coming from the south of Italy first, and then mainly migrant workers coming, international migrants. So these kind of workers, so racialized migrants, both internally and external migrants, start to be considered as suitable workers for dirty jobs. And moreover, since mid-90s, meat companies have gradually subcontracted labor through this specific form that we call cooperative of convenience. So this cooperative are specific type of companies that operate within the same plants, especially taking segments such as cleaning, such as the killing of the animals, so specific aspect of production. And they are able to, for main companies, they represent a way to reduce labor costs, because cooperatives hire workers with a contract which is not the main contract. The food industry contract that the company are usually applying to their direct employees. So they apply mainly contracts such as labor, transport and logistics, such as multi-services. Contracts that collective agreement that allow to lower labor costs, lower hourly labor costs. And moreover, this cooperative actually hire workers as member of the cooperative, so as associates to the cooperatives. And this allow also, for example, to through fake assemblies, workers can decide, which is not happening, of course, in the reality, but they can decide to reduce their salary under to the minimum standard. So this is also a way the cooperative used to reduce labor costs of pretending to run assemblies that actually are not existing, or they are run by the management of the cooperatives. So this cooperative exists actually from 1 to 2 years, then they disappear, they return under different names to avoid fines and to avoid fines for this type of irregularities. And I think Sergio is going to tell us more in detail how the system of cooperatives work in Italy. But what is relevant to our argument is that also within these cooperatives, the composition of the labor force gradually changed. So at the beginning, mainly South Italian workers were employed in cooperatives, and then nowadays in the cooperative we found only male and only migrant workers. So yeah, what happened actually is that at the beginning, when racialized subjects, so South Italian and migrant workers, start to take the hardest and heaviest tasks, for example, night shift, cleaning the animal guts. This, of course, this was somehow not like was highlighted positively by local workers, and often sometimes by their union, because of course local workers uh, like were quite happy not to have to perform this hardest task, no? So what we observed was a double process, no? On the one hand, uh, like South Italian workers, with the arrival of migrants, of international migrants, South Italian workers were able to increase their position within the workplaces. So they were progressively, they become white, we can say, no? They were de-racialized, while at the other, on the same time, group of migrants start to be racialized and attributed to the dirtiest job. So we assist to a creation of an internal hierarchy within workplaces, no? According to contractual and social position of the workers. So at the highest position, we have local Italian workers who are directly employed by the firm. Then we have South Italian workers, and then lastly, subcontracted migrant workers. And we refer to racialization processes because, of course, we collect several narratives similar to the one that we show in this slide, you know, where these workers, for example, it was a South Italian worker previously subcontracted and now direct employed by Beef Group. And he's saying that in his area, for example, in his shop floor, at the beginning, they were 100%, workers were 100% Italian, but now it's like it's 50-50 because there is an amount of physical labor that he says they ask to do to the negretti, you know, that means the black workers, but in a very derogatory term, the Negroes, no? And he describes these workers as no ability to learn. So very typical rhetoric to stigmatize and racialize subject, no? So on the one hand, like to summarize, what we observe is that on the one hand, racialization because somehow it lowered the opposition from autochthonous workers and from union and hampered worker solidarity. But on the other hand, also the existence of subcontracting somehow allowed allowed the process of racialization to take place more fiercely in the plant. And for example, we identified several of what we call racialization practices, namely practices that translate in the everyday reality of the workplaces what we define, no, as racialization processes. One of these racialization practices, for example, is the fact that workers are spatially and socially distant, so they are isolated. And this is mainly due to the legislation. I come back to the topic that Vladimir was introducing, so how the legal system shaped, no, somehow the labor market. In this case, for example, the legislation framing subcontracting, due to the legislation, workers share the same workplace, so they work in the same assembly line, but then, for example, they couldn't share changing rooms, break rooms, canteens. So the social environment in these plants is highly, and also the spatial environment is highly differentiated, and Italian and migrant workers do not mix, do not have opportunity to socialize, no? So in this sense, subcontracting is strengthening processes of rationalization of spatial and social distancing. Another of these rationalizing practices is, for example, the differentiation in the union activities, because as you probably know, like union activities, like especially workers' election, are differentiated according to the employer. So direct and subcontracted workers do not usually in different time and different moments towards the employer. And it also is a way of distancing workers, no, of fragmenting them. And also what we can observe is that the traditional union and grassroots union that are both present within these plants, they have a different membership. So while traditional unions remain mainly white unions, grassroots unions are deemed to be migrant organizations. And this is also creating different spaces, no? So again, strengthening differentiation, strengthening fragmentation. But on the other hand, what we could observe is that workers can also mobilize some racialized meaning. So usually based on their common position as racialized subject. So with a common background, with common, I don't know, skin color, religion background, they are able to mobilize themselves according to what we can define as racial ties. No? So this happened, for example, within grassroots union, as Sergio will definitely tell us. So the grassroots unions are often able to mobilize racialized subjects, so especially migrant workers, and they are also able to recruit them thanks to national networks and racial ties. But also we observe several other forms of solidarities which can take place outside the perimeter of traditional unions in more hybrid form, no, of organizing, or more everyday forms of solidarities between workers. I think my time is, I don't know, it's gonna end. Just the last slide, the conclusion, just to strengthen our argument, that is that race and the racialization process are a fundamental shaper of what is now called the subcontracted capitalism. So the element of race is pivotal because somehow he has facilitated the introduction of subcontracted labor, since worse jobs start to attribute to racialized subjects and to migrants, internal and then international migrants, so racialized subjects, especially through cooperatives of convenience. And in turn, outsourcing and the differentiation in labor conditions somehow strengthen racialization processes and produced what we call rationalization practices, no, in the everyday life of the workplace. So race can be understood as a fluid processual, mobile, contingent categories whose boundaries are everyday produced and reproduced within the workplace. And that's why wealth workers are also able to mobilize racial ties in order to organize and to put forward their claims. So I think I hope presentation was clear, and look forward for your question to go more into details. Thank you very much.
This is amazing. Thank you so much, Valeria, for presenting your paper on behalf of David. This is like really great within time, and plenty of food for thought here, which will come back to it during the discussion. And now, so in terms of proceedings, we first do the presentation and then we discuss everything together in the end. So I will give the floor to Sergio. Sergio, go ahead, please. Feel free to present, to talk about the experience that you want to share, and you also have 50 minutes.
Okay, thanks a lot. Do you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we do hear you.
Okay. I thank all of you, and okay, I agree completely on the presentation that Valeria did concerning this instrument of managing with the workforce through this subcontract labor system, no? And obviously, the first thing, very shortly, I would like to say is that in the last decades, we've seen many ways in which the companies have tried in many different ways to strengthen the power of the companies and to reduce the rights and the salaries and the economic parts of the workers. Okay, and this instrument of subcontracting is not only in this sector, but they are using in many other sectors: cleaning, logistics, transport, tourism, and on and on and on. And even before that, you know, in the last decades, even the laws, the national laws, have been changed in order to allow to give more power to the companies and less to the workers. But even before this system of this cooperative of convenience, how the way Valeria called them, so to force the workers to be members of a cooperative, completely broke all the system of the so-called national contracts in Italy, you know? So because they establish a double tie between the workers and the company. One is to be a worker, but the other is to be associate of the company. So the company could treat you not like a worker and consider you like a partner. And that was crazy, but that's something that is still going on. Obviously, the racialization, no, the contracts of thousands and thousands of migrant workers that came in Italy in the last 20 and more years is something that the companies try to use against them. I want to say, because, for instance, in many companies, they use different groups to use one against another. They use the immigration chains to contract new workers. So the last comers are in a kind of debt, not only with the company, but also with their community. And many times the company try to transform the same community of migrants like an instrument to control the same workforce, okay? And we see, for instance, okay, I had an experience in an industry dealing with these chickens and the meat industry, as you asked for this to be into the issue of this speech. They've been using this, and they did with the institutional unions a kind of agreement, local agreements, in order to create more and more divisions, more and more groups into the workforce. So not only what Valeria said between Italians and not Italians, but even with different groups, migrants from Eastern Europe, from Africa, from North Africa, Arabs, but also inside the same workforce. For instance, they are, even if they are a meat industry, there is a part of the national contract signed by the institutional unions that allow them to apply the contract of agriculture. And when they are considered as agricultural workers, they have completely different, because the law says that as the meat industry can depend from agriculture to feed the animals, they could do that. And in agriculture, in Italy, you are contracted practically daily, as a daily worker. And when you are a daily worker, you never reach a time in which you have the right to have a permanent contract. You can be precarious for all your life, year by year by year by year. And every year, nonetheless, the companies in December, they tell the workers, okay, you want to work next year too? Okay, you have to decide that you don't want a permanent work, that you want a temporary work, okay? So we have a small part of workers with permanent contracts that are mainly Italians. Then you have workers at second level with temporary contracts, but directly with the big company. And then you have a third level of temporary workers with cooperatives or with agencies, and on and on. And even the institutional unions, they said that you have to wait to do step after step after step, that the truth that is you never reach the goal, that the goal is just to work. And this is a system exactly to multiply division inside the working places. I don't want to go much farther on that, okay, even if this is a phenomenon that obviously is not okay, a casual, okay, but is a real system, okay. Obviously, I would like to focus, just to say very shortly even this, the fact that anyway, on the reverse, we've seen organizing this kind of migrant workers that have been completely abandoned by the institutional union, not just saying, as Valeria said, that they are the Italian unions and we are the migrant unions, but even because I think that as a structure, the approach of the institutional unions is to say, okay, we grant only a part of the worker, and the guarantee of the job, of the salaries of the permanent workers are due to the fact that there must be other hidden workers, racialized workers that work with less salaries, less rights, precisely to grant the others. So they say, even to the Italians, you don't have to make a unity together with them, because if you make a unity, then we will not be able to grant the same rights to all of you. We can grant the rights only to a part. The other part must work for you. And this is something that sometimes it happens even between different groups of migrants, okay? The newcomers, the olders, and on and on and on. Obviously, I would like to say that this thing have been anyway even a weapon in our hands, because when these groups, when the communities of migrants, they realize that this system is not granting them a process of implementation of the situation, but only to exploit them harder and harder. Obviously, this is a big strength, because I would like to say that many struggles with thousands and thousands of workers, they didn't came to us because we convinced them, but they came to us because they were tired to suffer some conditions. So they were already organized when they came to us. We only supported them in doing that. In this thing, another thing very important is being said many times here in Italy, that they have no memory of, and so the rhetoric of some even so-called left-wing unions no, to say, no, but this is the solidarity, so you have to suffer because there's a crisis going on and on and on, so you don't have to protest and so on. Okay, they don't care. Many times, I would like to say in my city, 99% of the times when we do struggle, we do strike, we do pickets and so on, is the first time. There is not a memory of past struggles. So everything is new and must be built in things like that, okay? And they use this racialization against the company. For instance, many times they tell me, we don't speak in Italian because the Italian are only the bosses. So we use our languages or English or whatever a native language. Obviously, sometimes there are some leadership of the groups that they are able to build alliances between Chinese, Nigerians, Algerians, or whatever. Okay, but this thing is not very easy, and I can say that if there's something that is very important is that even with Italian people that obviously have more freedom because normally have a family beyond them. So the way of struggle of young people normally is to refuse, is to resign, to go away, because they can resist longer, even being unemployed. But I can say that the breaking of these racial chains is the struggles are the fundamental thing. Because when you struggle together, and many Italians, they even recognize maybe after some time, even the leadership of some Nigerians or Moroccan workers or not Italian in that sense. And they can, even because when we get something, when we get new contracts, when we are able to make them close the cooperative and so on, this is for everybody, obviously. No, when you do a struggle, this is not only for the people who are in striking, it's for everybody. And this is very important. So, and this is something that when you are doing a strike and you are there all together, obviously in that case, no matter if you are Italian or not, okay? And last thing that I would like to say that is a very important thing, just to put another element, is that this thing of the racialization is used very much in a way in which the company, they try to have negotiation, not global, not collective, but individual or as groups. Because the problem is that in Italy there is democracy is a problem everywhere, but into the working places it doesn't exist at all. For instance, the workers are not free to come and organize themselves with the grassroots union. The rights to have assemblies, to have delegates, and everything we have in many places, but we had to conquer that because the law says that only the institutional union have the right to do the negotiation. So even if they have one member and we have 200, they can sign an agreement valid for all of them. So democracy, not even formal democracy. And this struggle for democracy, I think, is very important because obviously they prefer to exchange this formal democracy with I would like to call it racial group democracy, in the sense that to every group they can grant something. Okay, oh, the Nigerians are with the grassroots union. No, okay, so we prefer Chinese or we prefer some other groups. Okay. But this is a very, very big issue that goes together not only in subcontracted works, but in general, when because even in many companies, some very big company, where we did many struggle, we got very good collective contracts. The new step is, okay, they said, okay, we close all this thing, all this business of subcontracted work, so we contract directly all the workers. But when they do that, they say, okay, but the grassroots union is not allowed to enter in, okay? Because the problem is not just to grant more, higher salaries on and on. What really scares the company is when the workers are organized. Okay, thanks very much. I don't know. I think I stayed in my time.
Yes, you're perfectly in time, Sergio. Thank you so much for sharing these insights with us. It's really great to learn about what is exactly happening on the ground and what are you seeing in your daily work and what you're actually facing in, as you've said, like not organizing, but supporting these struggles that are going in the factories and on the ground. So great. Look forward to already discussing these insights in the discussion. And we're moving to our final presentation by Monica. Monica, you have the floor in the next 15 minutes. So you can share your screen, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to
start. Perfect.
Can you see it okay?
Great. Yes.
Okay. Oh no, first of all, I would like to thank, the organizers for giving us, Comisiones Obreras de Cataluña, the opportunity to present, to socialize, this experience that trade union experience we had in a sector, such as is the meat sector, that is so important, not only for Spain, where represents 2%, of the gross direct product, but also for Catalonia, where represents 4%, double this number. The union campaign, Carne sin Fraude, that in English will be meat without fraud, is a campaign at all levels. In the workplace, politically, social, judicial, thanks to the commitment, the effort, and the struggle of the entire organization, it has been possible to recognize the employment relationship of thousands of workers and dismantle false cooperatives. I'm going to try to summarize, because it has been till now more than 3 years, of work. So I am going to try to summarize it, even if it's not going to be easy, but at least I want to give you, the principal, touch points or some principal ideas, that maybe can be used also for as food for thought. So everything began, Comisiones Obreras, asked at a press conference to withdraw the administrative license to the false cooperatives, as well as a legislative change to combat their proliferation. A report was presented to highlight the increase in precariousness in the meat sector due to the use of workers as false self-employed by companies disguised as cooperatives. This is something, that you have already explained, in the previous presentations. A transfer of workers from employees to self-employed workers was taking place through false cooperatives. A corruption and manipulation of cooperativism to implement working conditions of 2 centuries ago. Having made the complaint public already in this press release, Comisiones Obreras intensified union action in 2018, and we met with the Director of Self-Employment, Social Economy and Corporate Social Responsibility, as well as we held several meetings and contacts with the Ministry of Labour to explain them the situation that we have identified and analyzed. In April, we also started already the mobilization, slowly in the different plants in order to ask for decent work. Shortly after these meetings, these contacts, the union registered a battery of complaints with the Labour Inspectorate affecting more than 80 meat companies at national level and different cooperative systems. Servicarne is the biggest, or it was the biggest, largest false cooperative at national level, employing or using 5,300 people, workers as false self-employed workers. And this cooperative, this false cooperative, was followed by another 7 cases. What Comisiones Obreras denounced to the inspectorate is the lack of corporate activity of these companies, as well as the lack of business structure. And therefore, they act as legal parapet to provide labor under less than legal conditions and with the flexibility imposed by the meat companies. Our aim, and that has to be very clear, our aim since the beginning was not to ensure that the case reported ended up with sanctions or heavy fines. That was not the goal of this campaign. The goal, what we wanted from the beginning, was that precarious and fraudulent employment will be transformed into a stable, salaried employment with working conditions equivalent to those of other workers in the sector. So this was the main goal from the beginning. July arrived, a month that we have to mark in our calendar. The Labor Inspectorate found that Servicarne, this false cooperative that I told you about, was really a fake cooperative, agreeing with Comisiones Obreras in all the statements that we made in our denounce, and stating that it was a front company used by the meat companies to obtain cheap labor with full flexibility. Despite this good news, immediately the first problems arose. Just hours after receiving this the oficio, from the inspectorate, the companies massively discharged the members, from the cooperative, because there was a hole, in the system that allowed them, to do that. So, hours after, they just, discharged, all the members. But, the Social Security, they were not, they knew what they were doing, and they changed the law in order to avoid this. So they make a fast, movement, from a legal point of view, in order to avoid this hole, in the law to allow them to do that. Within this hostile context, Comisiones Obreras de Cataluña reaches the first agreement with a meat company for the regularization of 1,200 false self-employed workers. For us, this was a turning point to get our goal, but it was not easy. It was a turning point, but it was very difficult that the other companies, the other meat companies, were following them. So saying that, in October, the union submits its latest, the latest package of complaints to the inspectorate, affecting 22 fake cooperatives operating in 150 companies in the sector. Most of the companies, as I said, maintain their refusal to avoid working with Servicarne as false cooperative, and they don't want to move 1 feet from their position. November arrives. We are talking about November 2019, and the union calls strikes in 5 companies of the group Valcompines. It was a success that the group did not like at all, for sure, and the union is sued for illegal strike. At the negotiation table, the company gave in and Comisiones Obreras called off the strike. And we got that 2,500 false self-employed workers were already employed by the company. After this experience, the Valcompines experience, also Prolongo immediately did the same, incorporating 800 false self-employed workers into their workforce, and also Disabasa with 200. These are mainly the main figures, but I have to tell you that together with those companies, many other small work companies, were adding, ex-false self-workers. December 27, 2019, another important day for the Carne Sin Fraude campaign, Comisiones Obreras presents the Meat Labor Traffic Light. It's a union tool, a trade union tool, with the aim of identifying the fraud-tainted products produced in the meat sector. In red are the fraud companies and their brands, and where those products are sold, in which supermarkets. In yellow are the companies that have regularized their situation, but do not comply with the collective bargaining of the meat sector. And in green are those that comply with both requirements. El Corte Inglés, you have all them, all those, icons that you have are all the main distribution channels in, in Spain. They cover nearly 100%. So El Corte Inglés, Mercadona, Carrefour, all food chains are exposed. So any person could check with suppliers, which suppliers comply and which suppliers do not comply. This tool works, and just 24 hours after launching the traffic light, several companies contact the union in order to understand what do they have to do to move from red to green, or at least from red to yellow, at least not to be on the red side. One by one, little by little, companies are already moving towards fraud-free meat, which means for us thousands of workers with labor rights. One point that we want to mention here is that it has been very important for us because, as you know, we are in the industry federation, but it has been very important, the cross-federation work, because working with the services federation in this case, all the channels has been made, because at the end, it's not a matter of who is producing fraud meat, it's who is selling it. So we are also, moving this fraud, this responsibility, not only to the companies producing the meat, but also to the companies selling it. And, at the social eyes, this is this was one of the main points, because at the end, maybe nobody knows who Servicarne is or who Proloso is, but everybody knows who Mercadona is, who Aldi is, who Carrefour is. So that was one of the main thing. The employers are upset, for sure. They don't like the traffic light at all, and they demand the union to withdraw it. But, as I said, why withdraw a tool that is just helping, to identify fraud and to help or to improve labor rights within this sector. In the meantime, the labor meat traffic light continues its work. The figures for us are encouraging, and more than 5,000 workers. But as always, there must always be someone who thinks that is smarter than everyone else and above the law. If I would be speaking about tennis, I would be speaking about someone else. But anyway, in this case, it was Embutido Rodriguez. For us in English, it will be Sausages Rodriguez. Rodriguez is the last name. So on January 16, 2019, a strike breaks out at Embutidos Rodriguez with 400 false self-employed workers. The strike is a success with 80% of the people following it. And the company responds the following day with the dismissal of 11 strikers. And in March, other workers are dismissed. So as you can imagine, strike is a right, it's not a crime. So seeing this situation, Comisiones Obreras develops a platform of support that is called Acuchillados Rodriguez, that in English should be like Stab Rodriguez, which arrives to Madrid, in front of the Congress of Deputies. Comisiones Obreras is a class union, so it's made that hundreds of delegates from other sectors, from other parts of Spain, joined the protest, because at the end, when they touch one of us, they touch all of us. So this is, or this has been for us, one key element, because at the end, as you were saying, people in this sector, or a lot of workers in this sector, they had nobody behind them. But, being, like a class union is what helped us, to support all this action. Time goes by, the company withdraws from the negotiations, they don't want to move. And in April, a new strike is called with resounding success. The union is carrying out an institutional and social campaign with the dismissed workers, culminating in a rally in front of the company on May 19th. Likewise, the response from our delegates is overwhelming. We have hundreds of buses going from many different cities in Spain in order to support this company that at the end is not a big or a huge company, it's a small company, but it became for us a flag that we should defend. On the same day of the rally, Comisiones Obreras reached an agreement with the company for the reinstatement of all the dismissed workers and the regularization of more than 400 false self-employed workers. And the question is always the same, is one more battle we want? For sure, we are very happy, but with suffering that would have been avoided. One aspect that I would like to mention that is key for us and for the future of the sector is the workers' organization at place of work. In all those companies where false self-employed workers, they from red to green, the trade union has organized union elections, and as a result of all the hard work done in all these years, we got majority of representation, something that for sure will help us to continue ensuring that labor rights are responded. We can proudly say that thanks to the commitment, work, and struggle of hundreds of thousands of people, we have managed to regularize 23,000 false self-employed workers and recover more than 200 million, because at the end, we don't have to forget that this is a fraud. So, but the battle does not end here. We still have to get that multi-service companies, companies that are also being used now by the meat sector, they apply the collective bargaining agreement of the sector for which they work, and not the company's own, that for sure is always below the sector one. In this way, we will be able to put, as we call, the icing, on the cake, and say that the meat sector in Spain is free of fraud, and that all the people who work in it have decent labor rights. So that was the, I know that I have been very fast, but it was a lot of events, in a long period. This has not been, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months campaign, at the end. It has been the effort of a lot of people and the time and hours of a lot of people in order to get these results. We are very proud, but we know also that we have a lot of work to do, because as you already mentioned previously in the presentations, they always find a way. So, we always have to be, fighting against, the new way. But one thing, and I think that, I don't remember now the name from the guy from Italy, Sergio, I say Roberto. But another thing that Roberto said, and it's true, is that when we talk about precariousness, everybody thinks about the bike, and this new economy, and these riders, and, for sure, there is a precariousness there, But we don't have to forget that we have very mature sectors as the meat sector, as the fish sector, that is another sector that we are going to fight now with another campaign called Fish Rights, because, we have a lot of people working in conditions that, I guess that Sergio, has also the opportunity or had also the opportunity to see it. They are really, really bad conditions. You cannot even imagine it until you really see it with your own eyes. So that's all. Thanks a lot. I hope to have done it in my time also.
Yes, that's great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Monica, for this really great insights. And it's really interesting to see also the Spanish perspective and so many overlapping points for a discussion. So these were all great talks. Thank you for everyone. Really fascinating insights. I have so many questions myself, but I will open first the floor to the audience to ask questions. You can either raise your hand in the reactions below and I can call you out, or you can just write in the chat that you have a question and I will be calling you out and everyone can ask their questions directly.